We are now reconvening our meeting, and we are going into item C, discussion of the city retailers' sales tax extension. If the clerk would read.
Discussion of the proposition of levying an additional special purpose retailer sales tax of 0.75% in the city of Topeka for the purpose of paying for certain improvements in the city pursuant to KSA 12-187 at SEEK as amended.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Governing body, tonight Dr. Jason Peak, our Public Works Director, will go through some information regarding our city retailers tax extension. He'll provide a great deal of information related to questions that had been asked back at the town hall meeting, to provide in-depth information in regards to that, and then also show you some interesting maps and what projections are for the future. So with that teaser, I'll give you Dr. Peak.
Dr. Peak, good evening.
All right, good evening. So it seems like I'm always the closer for discussion items now.
Best for last.
But anyway, so we're going to talk about sales tax, and the city manager mentioned we got a lot of questions at the town hall that was held, a lot of emails that were sent to council that were forwarded to us. And before we get into that, I just want to kind of set the stage for what we're talking about, so people watching out at home, we get misconception about sales tax, and there are two special purpose sales tax currently at work in the city of Topeka. What we refer to them as the citywide and the countywide. And just kind of the second half, the countywide was a sales tax that was renewed January 1st of 2017. And that included specific street projects. It included funding for implementation of the Bikeways Master Plan. It included funding for the Kansas Expo Center as well as economic development. And I know we heard at the town hall, I don't want you to spin on that, but I just wanted to set the record. We're not talking about that sales tax tonight. We're talking about renewal of the citywide sales tax, which began on October 1st, 2009, and had very specific things about maintenance and improvements of existing city streets, gutters, curbs, and sidewalks. So with that, I want to just kind of give you an outline. We're going to kind of talk about the existing sales tax, and as we looked at the town hall and the emails that were sent in with questions, there were four kind of themes that came out of that. And the first one I'd say was the citywide sales tax program successful? Then there was a question of how did the sales tax change funding for streets? And then a lot of questions about please provide an accounting for expenditure. So people want to understand how was this money used, and we're going to go through that. And then the last theme we kind of heard is, okay, so moving forward, what's different or what's your plan? And so that's kind of the four topics we'll get into tonight. So diving right into talk about successes of the 2009 citywide retailer sales tax. I think there were successes with that tax, and just want to highlight a few of those with you. We've had or by the time it finishes in 2019, we'll have over 130 individual projects that citywide sales tax paid for. And to date, 99 of that 130 projects are already complete, and we've got 6 that are currently in active construction, and additional 25 projects, and this covers all streets, curb and gutter, sidewalks, all those programs within it. And I think more importantly, and it's a footnote to keep in your mind as we talk about what will be different, this sales tax covered about 310 lane miles of street work over that 10-year period, which represents about 19% of our pavement area in the city. And then the last thing I'd say about that, just looking back, not being here in 2009, one of the major emphasis of that sales tax was to work on our arterials. That was a lot of the first projects you saw right out of the bat, a heavy emphasis. Let's hit those roads that people travel on the most. And as we showed you with the pavement condition index, we've seen significant improvement in the pavement condition. So I think that's another success. And the other commitment was, as we got to the sunset of the sales tax, was to increase the investment in our neighborhoods. And I think you'll see in that map how we have, since 2016, spent some focus in neighborhoods. So I think a lot of success out of that sales tax. So the next question was, how did the sales tax impact funding for streets? And this is just looking at street expenditures, so just remember that sales tax also pays for curb and gutter, ADA sidewalks, alleys, and other things. So just taking the portion that pays for street expenditures. If we look prior to 2009 imposition of this tax, we had a little over $4 million annually invested in street projects. Some years it was larger, some it was lower, but on average, and that's from 1997 to 2009, going back and looking through our budgets. And a lot of those projects were focused on what we call capacity projects. We have congestion, so we're adding lanes to improve traffic flow. You get some pavement maintenance out of that, but it's expensive to buy real estate, add those lanes, things. So that was a heavy focus of that. So then looking from 2010 to 2017, this is all fund sources combined, including the sales tax. We see that we've averaged expenditures of a little over 15.64 million on street projects. And that's had a heavy focus on maintenance. I mean, there is some capacity that we've done with projects over the period since 2009, but that sales tax, that maintenance and improvement of existing streets, has shifted that focus to be heavy on maintenance of our pavement. And so a better way to kind of illustrate some of this was and it gets to where the money was spent. This map here kind of shows three different categories, but what's highlighted, these are the locations of street projects that the citywide sales tax dollars were spent on. And the green reflects basically street projects that have been completed. The orange represents the projects that are in active construction phase. And then the blue are the projects that are basically in design phase moving into next year. And then we have a lot of small dots that are curb and gutter, our alley projects, our sidewalk projects. At this scale, putting those dots on the map wouldn't resonate, but just kind of putting those in. And we have 13 of those projects completed, 4 in the construction phase, and 15 in the design and planning phase. And so the last thing I would highlight about this map is, so this reflects the 310 lane miles. I think you can see it, all areas of the city have benefited from the sales tax. There's wide coverage of that. And as I mentioned, as you see in the later years, those large conglomerations of color represent that residential focus that we shifted into. And then the other piece that you don't see on this map, but it's just that increased coordination. So a lot of these projects also reflect our underground utility infrastructure. So that partnership with our utilities and making sure that we're getting things taken care of in a one-shot deal. So with that, I'll just kind of pause before I go into how we're accounting funds and see if there are any questions at that point.
Are there any questions from the body for Dr. Peak? Councilwoman Heller.
No question, but that's really well done. That's what people were asking for, I think, and you've done a really good job of putting it together. Thank you.
You're welcome. So moving along, so we got a lot about, let's have an accounting of the funds. So just kind of, we're going to go through some numbers here, but I want to help you understand where this comes from. So we work with the finance department. As you know, they do a comprehensive annual financial report. So basically at year end, after we are closing the books, Nikki and her team put together this document. And so that's where this information comes to. And the first slide I want to show you is basically a summary of the revenues. So this tax started in a partial year in 2009. And so this is looking at revenues, and the main column, this is the sales tax, was about 119 million through 2017 has been collected. We have 2 other sources of revenue because this is accounted in a separate fund. We have the 50-50 sidewalk projects, and many of you know this is where we put up money for half of the cost, and the resident that are eligible pay the other 50%. So we pay 100% of the cost to the contractor, and we receive income for that 50-50 program. And then the last piece, so this is a cash fund, and so as cash is sitting within this fund, we do have investment income on that, and that's reflected. So in total, 2009 through 2017, that being the last complete fiscal year, we had about $120,650,000, $650,985 in revenue just within the citywide sales tax fund. So that's the revenue side. I want to look at the expense side. And a lot of information on this, so we took a similar approach. We basically went to the comprehensive annual financial reports, went through and allocated, this is accounted by project, so putting them into the project categories that are eligible expenses for the half-cent sales tax. So we have the 50/50 sidewalk projects, alleys, the curb and gutter, sidewalks, half-cent personnel. So there were two personnel that are funded through this program basically for project management and administration. We have what are called the half-cent projects. That's basically the street projects. And then the other conversation we've had is that we do use this fund and have for the last 3 years to cover some of our commodity expenses for de-icing of snow. And so in total, through 2017, we've had $107,325,950 spent within the fund. And I think a better way for you to kind of represent how this money gets allocated is to look at pie chart. And so, with this, if you look at the big orange piece, that's the expenses of the fund have been spent on street projects, a little over 91%. And coming in second and third, second would be our curb and gutter program at about 3.9% and sidewalks at 1.8%. So just reiterate, this has really done a lot to increase our funding for street projects. And the last thing I'd say just about accountability, which is very important for how we manage the fund. So what types of controls are in place on that? And just want to highlight kind of 3 categories that cover these bullets. And the first thing is this is a special purpose sales tax. So there's ballot language that the governing body back in 2009 approved and put to the voters that specifies these are eligible expenses. And my understanding is also in October of 2009, as we began to implement this program, the city manager at that time asked legal staff to basically develop a legal memo that says, hey, engineers, public works, this is what you need the test to meet these eligible expenses. And so we've used that as a guiding document. So that's at the start of this program. And then what I'd say is every year since then, we have 2 key input processes for implementation of these funds. We have our annual capital improvement program, which that's presented to the public for review and a comment, and then ultimately brought to this governing body for review and adoption. And so that's a process for input to make sure that we're accounting on that. And then the second piece, like I said, this is accounted in a separate fund. It's managed in that way. So through the operating budget process, that information is once again presented to the public for review and comment, and then brought back to this governing body ultimately for review, recommendation, and adoption. And so that process occurs annually. And then the last piece I'd say is, within the financial system that the city has, we have many funds that we work with, and this one is a separate accounting fund for the citywide retailers sales tax. So that's a general, that's a good place to stop in looking back at the 2009 sales tax, and stand for any questions on that before I talk to you about the plan moving forward.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So we have to ask about the $12 alley expense.
2014.
Yeah. For one thing, it's impressive that you accounted for $12.
So that is probably, I don't have that detailed answer for you, but I'll get back to you to see. I know we have some projects that's accounting expense number that just gets hold when there's not a significant expense.
Well, what I was wondering is that a typo, or did we really only spend $12 in 2014?
I will take a look and get you an answer on that.
But my comment is, Jason, this is exactly what we needed. This is incredible work, and I really appreciate the time and effort that you and your team, and I expect, Nikki, your team was involved in this as well. This is really excellent information. I can't wait to present this to my constituents.
And I guess the other piece I'd add, we're going through the presentation, but attached with the report is an actual written Q&A summary answering these questions as well.
Councilwoman Clear.
so I don't have to read the Q&A, I can ask you. Tell me about the personnel, half-cent personnel. So if we have, just to get it clear in my mind, you have the language on the ballot. Did it say you can use that for the personnel?
The ballot language did not. The ballot, I may defer to legal in just getting this right, but the ballot language basically said it had to be an existing street, alley, and it had to be spent on the cost for maintenance and improvement, and labor is a cost related to maintenance and improvement. So under that test, it's an eligible expense. And so I just, you think about 130 projects that have been administered, having a staff person to basically manage the design, review, soliciting bids, hiring the contractor, managing the contractor. That's basically what
That
these
makes sense.
personnel are doing, and they're dedicated to projects funded by the half cent.
Okay, that makes sense, thank you.
Additional questions, comments? Councilman Lesser.
Yeah, walk me through, I know you weren't here at this point in time, but, and this is really good, easy to read, easy to flow through. Couple questions that I have is, obviously, the ballot question did not change, but as we've talked about in the past a little bit, the snow removal where, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, we had none, then all of a sudden 15 through 17. What, if the ballot language didn't change, did the interpretation change of how that money and the way the ballot was written?
I wouldn't say the interpretation, the other side of this story that, we're not talking about is the motor fuel fund. And that motor fuel fund is what has been our primary maintenance fund for streets. And I've talked to you about the fact that the motor fuel fund also supports street sweeping, alley maintenance, and it's a separate fund as well. And the revenue coming into that fund, basically, we're collecting revenue at the same amount we were collecting in 1997. And so if you adjust that, we just have not had any growth in revenue in that fund. And we have been paying for commodity prices, or commodity purchases out of that fund, funding asphalt material that we do with repairs. And I think just not being here in 2015, budgets are tight, and it was how do we pay for the cost of snow commodities? And a decision was made, this is an eligible expense and consistent with the ballot language. But
And if I may add, because I was part of the council body at that point in time when we had that discussion, the concerns were that one of the biggest issues that we have with potholes happening in the community is that if you have water that sits for a long time, it starts seeping in, and then that creates an expansion process that also deteriorates the streets further. So the whole intent that was, and correct me if somebody that was here, if I'm wrong, was that we would make sure that we would maintain the roads in such a fashion that they were kept clean and the snow was removed to avoid having further deterioration on that process. Councilwoman Ortiz.
And if I may add, that is correct, but you are correct as well, because we had a city manager that says potholes was not maintenance, not a part of maintenance, and that snow removal was not a part of maintenance, which all the council members agreed that it was a part of maintenance, a huge part, and we had all these potholes popping up everywhere. So that's why you'll hear from this corner, is that a part of maintenance? Because we all agreed it is a part of maintenance, and we should be able to use that, but he would not come off that money, and he would not sign that. So that's what changed. That's why you see the amounts in there of the funding that's changed, because we had somebody that come in with sense and said, yes, that is a part of maintenance, and city council members, I hear you loud and clear.
The only other question I have in looking at this is, one of the questions that came up in the CIP was, was looking at the snow removal cost and stuff. And the numbers that I was provided at that point in time aren't matching the ones that are listed on here, and I'm curious why that is. I mean, it's significantly different, why I'm asking.
I'll go back and double check and make sure that we communicate, but part of what we budget in the CIP is, it's the budget. So we set aside $1 million out of the curb and gutter as being eligible for snow removal. So we could spend up to that budget. What this number reflects is what we actually spent. And that's the other thing about, I think, of the accountability of this fund is, so, you know, if you take the money that we spend, if we budgeted and we didn't spend all that within this fund, it carries forward to next year within the same fund and then is put into the contingency that's eligible for other projects. So I do think that's one strength of being able to do this within that fund is you can budget it, you don't use it, it's still.
Yeah, with all due respect, that's not answering my question, though. My question was.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I'll go back and look at the numbers and make
The
sure.
report for 15, that's what I'm saying, the report versus the numbers that I was given for our CIP are not matching up. I understand what
I
you're saying.
understand. So
And
we'll take-
our budget was 1.5 million to do curb and gutter and the snow removal part. And so that is the number that is included in our budget for this year. But we'll verify, we'll show what was put in the budgets each of the following year, each of these years compared to actuals to answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions or comments? Councilwoman Ortiz.
Councilman Lesser, 1 year we had one major snow, so we didn't really use anything, and the other year we had maybe two and a half, if you want to say that. And then I think we got smarter, and like if we didn't get so much snow, we just let it clear off by itself. Is that correct, Mr. Peak?
We have updated the snow removal plan and there are different strategies.
As opposed to trying to, just try to treat it, and so that made the numbers fluctuate. But
No, and I understand that. What might quit, I'm looking at what was spent, and when I look at, on our report here of expenses for 2015, we're showing our half-cent snow removal was $260,000. And the number that I was given of how much we spent when we were going through the CIP process is saying we spent $867,000. So that's what I'm trying to understand is why there's a difference between the information I was given on the CIP regarding the snow removal and then the drastically smaller amount that's being reflected here as we're looking moving forward. That's what I'm trying to
And we'll take a look at it and get you an answer on that, sir.
think.
Councilwoman Heller.
Just to maybe wrap that around, I think it's good that people are bringing it up. People have known my position. I have not been supportive. Dr. Peak has done, for snow removal, Dr. Peak has done such a good job of identifying how many miles we need to get done and what kind of money we need to get the PCI rating. I would just suggest that when we wrap this up and go to ballot, it's real clear whether it's in or out, and if there's polling that needs to be done in terms of putting the numbers out to the public and finding out what the public sentiment is, then we have not a lot of time, but some time to do that.
Okay, seeing no, Councilman Mays.
Is this presentation going to be available on the website for people to see? Yes. Okay.
Great question. Okay, seeing no other questions, Dr. Peak?
And so then the last question is, what would be different with the next phase of the citywide sales tax program? So what I'm going to go through with you is two different scenarios that look at, we've had previous discussions about the main difference between where we were in 2009, where we are. And what I'd say is that we have a performance target that we're working towards. Through discussions with this body, we talked about to strive for a PCI goal of a 60. So that's moving all of our streets overall into a fair condition with an aspirational goal of a 70. What I'm going to present to you is those two scenarios where we have that performance goal, then we can go back and model what treatment strategies are needed with that and help understand some budget dollars. And the two we're going to look at is a budget of $24 million and a $31 million program. So this first map I'm showing you is the $24 million budget, and just kind of walk you through what you're looking at here. So this is, the colors are highlighting streets that would be worked on with a $24 million budget. And just the other understanding is that $24 million reflects all the street project funding sources. So this would include citywide sales tax, geo bond, money that we get from federal, state, as well as what we spend out of motor fuel fund. Because that's what we need, is a holistic program, all those efforts working together. And the different colors basically kind of highlight, as we look at treatment strategies, it's the right treatment at the right time. And we've kind of put those within CIP planning windows. So the green color is 2019 to 2022, the red color is 2023 to 2026, and the blue is 2027 to 2029. And so all these roads, there are different treatment strategies being applied, and I'll run through. Some of that's preventative maintenance, rehabilitation, or reconstruction. The analogy that I use for that, preventative maintenance, that's your oil changes. That's the most cost-effective treatment. If you do it right and early, you can really extend the life of a road. Repair is more costly. So that's like getting a brake job or, replacing the tires on your car. You're going to spend a little bit more money, but it will stretch the life of the road. And then lastly, those reconstruction strategies, that's your replacement. That means that we are basically going in, tearing it up and replacing it. Under this scenario, this would get us to a 60, basically at the end of the renewed sales tax. And it covers a little over 1,272 lane miles of pavement area over that 10-year period. And so we talked about 300 and a little over 300 lane miles with the first sales tax. Now we're talking about, because we're investing in different strategies, 1,200 lane miles of work. All right, so that's a little overview of 24, so I'm going to switch it to 31 million, and I'll give anyone $1 that can tell me the difference between the two maps.
I've been looking.
Right, so it's really hard to tell because there is a difference. I mean, there's of course more lane miles that you're doing because you have more money in the budget. And so this basically represents about 1,460 lane miles, which is about 90% of our pavement area. And so these are forecasts. This is what we can do if you set PCI goals and we talk about budget resources and we can kind of model. But I do want to caveat all this with these are forecasts, right? In the sense of we have to coordinate with our partners, utility partners, and it's a 10-year period. Things will change. And so timing and location of these will change as well. But to kind of get at the difference of what those two different strategies give you is to look at this. We talked about preventive maintenance, rehab, repair, and reconstruction. The green bars basically represent an annual budget of $24 million, which gets us to that PCI goal of 60. The $31 million budget gets us to a PCI of 65. And so you see there's a heavy investment in preventative maintenance. That's where we get the most of our payback. If we're keeping our good roads good, that means they're not deteriorating as fast. We have kind of a medium investment in our rehab and repair. Those are roads that aren't too far gone, that the treatment costs aren't as costly. And then there's smaller investment in the replacement, or I shouldn't say smaller investment, there's a smaller number of lane miles, but this is your most costly investment because we are basically replacing those roads. And that means something because at the end of 2029, when you look back and you say, was this successful? Well, we have two measures to look at. Our current estimate is the value of streets needing reconstruction at the end of 2029 would be $355 million for a PCI of 60 versus $243 million with a PCI value of 65. And we've shown you that chart before. This is when you really start to move the needle and you're fixing streets. Those streets that get replaced, our overall condition goes up. And then as this treatment moves forward, because we're never done working on streets, we're never done. You'll see an increase in our lane miles of preventative maintenance. You'll see the rehab and repair strategies go up, and you start to see that reconstruction. And then you start to have your budget kind of level out because you have a regular maintenance program. We're still in a catch-up phase because we've told you, we've got a lot of streets in poor condition. So those streets you're still going to be fixing potholes on over this period of time, ultimately until you can afford to replace them. So that's just kind of a real brief snapshot of what would be different. Like I said, it's a performance-based goal. It helps us understand financial impact. And we can run other iterations if the council desires, but that's kind of based on what we've heard through your goal setting. And then just to kind of wrap up the presentation, really, what the next steps are is where we started this conversation. So as we look to renewing this sales tax, we need a decision from the council on a sales tax rate, whether it's to maintain it at its current level or increase that. We need discussion on what's the appropriate ballot language, and then ultimately put that into a resolution that gets adopted. And just like, the last comment I'd say on that is think about timing. I know we have lots of time to talk about this in days, in the sense that the resolution doesn't have to be there till August, but once the decision is made, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done as far as getting out to the public, sharing this information, helping them understand why you've made the decision and what direction we're headed. And so we just ask if there's a way to be aggressive in setting that sales tax rate, adopting that ballot language, and getting a resolution adopted. That gives us more time to put information out there to the public. And with that, I'm done and would stand for any questions.
Would you mind if we had the individual signed up for public comment speak first, or?
Can I just get some clarification on
Yes, absolutely.
So just a couple quick clarifications on the maps. Are these based on the existing ballot language, just repair what's there, or enhancements where necessary?
This is focused on pavement management. So this isn't about adding curb and gutter to streets. This is about looking at the right treatment strategies at the right time that increase the PCI.
Okay, and does this plan touch every road in the city, or are there still some that are not included in this 10-year plan?
There are still some roads that are not included in this plan, and as I said, this is a forecast. These roads will change.
Is your best guess that we would need an additional 10-year cycle to touch those other roads that can't be covered in this plan, or is a 5-year cycle after that sufficient to touch those additional, or do you know?
I don't have that answer with me, but
Okay.
we could look at
Okay,
that.
if you wouldn't mind, I'd appreciate it.
Councilwoman Hiller also had a clarification before we go to public comment.
I do. I was doing real well keeping up with you, but I fell off at this point. If we could go back to the slide that showed the different bars of what we would be using the money on. Okay. You were talking about combining a number of sources of money to do this, not just our half-cent sales tax. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then you were talking about lane miles. What we've been doing so far is just a once-over on anything that gets addressed in the 10 years, but something like crack sealing gets done every year. And so the lane miles, you might count the same lanes every year for 10 years versus just once. And so, and for the most part, at least on our major streets, we're doing reconstruction right now, yet there's very little reconstruction.
So there's
And then, and did you mention that the county-wide sales tax was included in this? It is?
yes. So
Okay.
just to, I guess, kind of respond to that, what we've talked to you about is a program, and there are multiple fund sources that support this pavement management program. One is the countywide, so this includes looking at the work that we're doing on those countywide ballot-approved projects. It includes the projects we've identified in the CIP that would be eligible for GO bond funding. It includes the preventative maintenance work that we do through the motor fuel fund for crack sealing, as well as some of the strategic concrete panel replacement and other things. And then the primary funding source, as we said to you, has been the citywide sales tax that's made that up.
I guess it began to blur over in terms of then narrowing what we would use the citywide sales tax for, and I'm not sure where that sifted
So
out.
we would use it for maintenance of, I mean, this reflects basically what I'd say is similar ballot language that is in there today. that
Okay.
We would continue to focus on maintenance of existing streets under either one of these programs. But the main difference between that is, as opposed to heavily focusing on arterials or heavily focusing on reconstruction, we're looking at the right strategy at the right time, preventative maintenance, rehabilitation, or reconstruction that helps us reach that overall performance goal that you guys have agreed to.
Thank you.
Okay, so could we wait for the public comment? Let's go to public comment so that we could hear our constituents share their concerns and questions. And then we'll go ahead into body discussion. The first person signed up to speak is Mr. Representative Vic Miller.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council, Mr. City Manager. I do appreciate the opportunity to offer citizen comment. Let me say at the outset that as it relates to extending the half-cent sales tax, I'm neither for nor against at this moment. This was very helpful information. As to increasing it, I'm leaning against. And by the way, I would ask that you be more careful when you advertise or speak about this item that it is not listed as an extension of the existing tax. What's being proposed is an increase, and that should be more clear. If indeed that is the proposal, it needs to be very clear to the voters, it's an increase. And that concerns me. I would like to talk mostly anecdotally, and my personal observation as to our current plan and what we've done over the last many years is our streets are better, but they're not as good as what I expected them to be after this sizable expenditure of money. So what I'd like to speak to you about, and I want to share with you, and I use the word numerous, and I don't use that word lightly, but I have numerous comments from my colleagues across the state that I work with over at the Capitol. Repeatedly, they expressed to me that our streets are some of the worst they've encountered. The last couple months, I've had the opportunity to travel into a number of their cities, and mine is the same observation. For whatever reason, however it's going on in other places, it seems like their streets are in better condition than what we're accustomed to here in Topeka. What I'm asking you to do before you put this on the ballot and attempt to convince me to vote for it is to do a more holistic review of what these other Kansas cities are doing. And when I say that, I mean, what are they spending per mile? What are their public works practices that may or may not differ from ours? What are their standards for construction? Are they greater or less than ours? And I've been told that we have low standards, and that's one of the reasons we're constantly maintaining our streets as we are, that we're being penny wise and pound foolish, that if we invested more in the quality of the construction, we wouldn't be redoing the work so often. I don't know. I'm not an engineer. I'm nowhere close to an expert on the subject. I've been told that by people, however, whose opinion I do respect. So, I would ask that your review, your study, and your presentation to the voters include a comprehensive review of those kinds of things. Many of these cities that I speak of, that I can tell, do not have these special sales tax add-ons. They're making do with the fuel tax money that they are given for quote-unquote maintenance. So again, I think it's a fair question. Perhaps we can learn something as to how are they doing it, if indeed they are doing it better than us. I'm not saying they are, but anecdotally, I get that a lot. Find out how they're doing it, how it differs from how we're approaching it, and how we might get a better bang for our buck. And I will close with one micro comment, and that is no matter what you do, try to get some sidewalks between 6th and 10th Street on McVicker, because that's a busy street, and there are parts of that street, people are reduced to walking on the street because there's no sidewalk on either side. I'd stand for any questions, but I do again, thank you for the time.
Thank you. Representative Miller. Seeing none, Councilwoman Ortiz.
Representative Miller, I want to personally thank you for all the hard work you've done for the city legislation this year.
We had a good year. That's my job, and I appreciate the opportunity to do it. Thank you.
Keep doing your job.
Thank you very much. The next person signed up to speak is Mr. Joseph Ledbetter.
Thank you, everybody. I will not be able to finish in 4 minutes, just telling you. See, I got 4 more. Is that ready? So I'm watching these graphs, and I remember one of the things we were taught in our MBA program at KU was always beware of graphs. You can make them say anything you want. I did not hear how many total lane miles we have in the city, so I would like that number before I leave.
1,600.
What is it?
1,600.
Okay, I thought it was 1,600. That's what I thought I heard. So thank you. I looked at this report that was online at the one town hall meeting. I've asked for 3. I still have yet to hear when we're going to have 2 more, but I know the East Topeka Council with Momentum 2000 is going to try very hard to at least set up 1 more. But I think we need at least 2 more for the public. One of the documents I sent all of you, and it's of record, is the ballot language is due on August 24th. So we have plenty of time to have more town hall meetings. I could not make this one. I was at the Parks and Rec board meeting, which somebody on this council appointed me to, and I try to be very diligent about my attendance.
8 of 8.
And get things done. I want to definitely take out any misinformation that was said earlier by anybody. We are talking about 2 sales taxes when we talk about city budget. We're getting an additional $7 million from the county sales tax right now. And I have that as a exhibit, which I will go ahead and enter into the record. It shows very much how much money we're getting this year in not only sales tax, but it's about $23 million to repair our streets. Some of that comes from the county, some of it comes citywide. I also have been told that the citywide sales tax money will increase to about $14.5 million from the $12.5 that's been projected. So there's extra money right there. So we've got 2 extra streams of money. First, more money from the half cent, if we go half cent, which I would lean towards at this point. I will never lean towards a 75% of a cent. Based on my observations of what got done with the last 10 years, and based on the number of complaints I hear about the streets not being repaired correctly, and the lack of deadlines being met on street projects, I hear a lot of complaints. And I've heard them not only from public, not only from other government officials with the county and other places I've talked to, but also with Momentum 2022, which I've been very active with, 2 different groups there, especially the East Topeka Council's been very vocal about they want more productivity. That's the word, more efficiency out of city staff. When they do make repairs, they want repairs to last. I sent you a photograph, I've sent it several times, of some potholes that were repaired near my office that lasted 2 months. And I've heard, well, it was an aggregate problem. Well, I've seen these aggregate problems, if you want to call them that, all over the city. And it's the same problem. I see city staff not clean the potholes out like I see the county do, or like I see Beddits do. They don't use compressed air. They do a very mediocre job of cleaning. Then there's no chemicals to put in, like I see Beddits use, to bond the product with the old surface, and then I don't see it pressed down with a roller I see Bettit's using even a flame to do it and then compress it down. And they were charging the city, I'm gonna ask for a 4-minute extension, if you'd be so kind.
We have a motion and a second. Motion by Councilwoman Ortiz, second by Councilman Emerson. We now proceed with the voting for an extension of 4 minutes.
We have 8 yes.
Thank you.
8 having voting yes, the motion passes. Mr. Ledbetter, please continue.
And so, Bettit's was charging us $10,000 a linear mile to do crack and seal in the neighborhood I'm in. And I'm wondering if you project that out by 1,600 miles, how much is it going to cost just to do the crack and seal? My point is that it looks like the private sector is doing a better job than when we have our own staff do it. And what concerns me is that these potholes continue to be potholes instead of a fixed surface. I was told by the county that they have a goal that a pothole had better remain fixed for at least a year. And they put this into their computers, they note these things, and they verify. I asked the city the same question, and I could get no answer. We don't know what our goal is. Well, if you don't have a goal, you'll never meet it, okay? And that's just being a good coach. That's just having leadership. This next handout I want to show you talks about where we're at in sales tax already compared to other major cities. There's only one major city that I could find in Kansas that has a higher sales tax than Topeka. So we're already at second place, which is not a good place. You don't want to be the #1 tax person in a city or a state and then trying to bring in more business or more investment. The next one I want to show you shows that Olathe is the top one, just a little more than us, but their real estate property tax is also 30 mils less, which means they pay 20% less on their property taxes than our typical homeowners and businesses do. I've been to Olathe. I haven't seen the street repair problems that we've got, but I've been all over Johnson County and I haven't seen these kinds of problems. I've been through Lawrence. I haven't seen these kind of problems. The questions that I'm getting are, why are we not meeting deadlines on time and saving our taxpayers a lot of money? If we had productivity gains and efficiencies that we actually measured, could we prevent, could a half-cent sales tax perform as much as this 3/4 cent sales tax if we just had the efficiencies? Let me give you, for instance, of a couple roads I'm aware of how they were done. California, 2016, only 1 block got done. Shut down for 8 months. The next month, or the next year, I went up and talked to the interim city manager and Jason, and I said, do we not have contractors that can do 8 blocks at a time? I said, why are we shutting this whole street down? In 2017, they got 7 blocks done, which made my point. We could have gotten 8 blocks done with 1 year. And so we had the street torn up all that time, 2 years instead of 1. The next one that I was aware of was 49th Street, which was a JADO project, which, because they bid it in a timely fashion, the bids went out at the end of January. 8 contractors bid on that project, and it came in with design cost 35% less than what the project budget was. And I'm going to tell you, if you drive out there right now, that road's almost done. They started in March, and it's probably, I'm predicting, it's going to be finished in July. So wouldn't the citizens be a lot more supportive of the street department if they saw that kind of productivity? I think they would. But right now, I'm not supportive of their program. I'm not seeing the kind of results I want as a taxpayer. And as somebody who's actually got an MBA, and no, I'm not an engineer, but I tell you what, I know when a timeline has to be met, and I know when it's not being met, and I know when a repair's not done right. I can see it. So I want to thank you for your time, and I know that was a little bit sizzling, but I think we really have got to address productivity issues with the street department. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Ledbetter. Mr. Clark Trammell.
Hello again. I don't want to repeat anything that's said. I just want to affirm that I agree with both Mr. Miller and Mr. Ledbetter, and that these are intelligent men that speak from knowledge. So I do want to add a couple of things. One, this is a regressive tax. Let's remember that. And it will affect, if we increase the tax, those that are lower income and poor are going to have a harder time taking care of their families with a tax increase than they're already having. Always have to be sensitive to that, and that's your job, and you're aware of that. I also want to say that I have been interviewing and talking with a lot of entrepreneurs, small business people, and citizens. And the quote that I gave at the meeting we had at the Enforcement Center, I'm on record, so I won't repeat all that. You can see what I've recommended and commented about. But the comment that constantly comes back is, we're taxed out. And I think that says it all. I would support, and I believe the community that I have been engaged with, would support the half-cent increase or renewal, but not an additional 0.25%. I think the city, as I've said before, no criticism, just business, has to prove itself that it can efficiently spend the money it has to gain the confidence of the community to support an increase of some sort. But our taxes are high, as Joe Ledbetter pointed out. And think about this. We have districts where we're adding an additional $1 to our already high sales tax. When you're buying something on $10, that's 10%. Think of that. In room, to stay in a hotel room here, it's almost 18% when you add all the add-ons on. We're running off maybe more revenue than we're bringing in by our tax structure. So, long story short, Madam Mayor said efficiency. I want to pick up on that. We need to be more efficient. I think that is a key word. We also have contracting issues. I think we need to look at contracting effectiveness, efficiency of staff, how we're bidding things. I think the money is there to meet what you're looking at 0.75%. The last thing I would say is we do want good roads. I think the half-cent can be sold. It's my understanding there are two parts to this. Well, I didn't hear that discussed. It was my understanding that we were talking about renewing the tax or increasing it. The other was that we were going to create a more inclusive approval of what you're able to spend the money on from what you're doing now. So when you talk about this, I think we need to make sure we cover both sides of it, because I haven't heard that presented yet, and it's my understanding that was important, and I think it is, and we talked about that. Why do something twice when we can just go and do it the first time and not increase the cost from there? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Trammell. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Honor. So first, I'll make a couple of comments. For one thing, I quickly looked up the city of Olathe and their mill levy. There are 5 taxing entities that are part of the Olathe mill levy. We have 11. So the mill levy that's in this community is set by a much larger number of government entities than it is over in Olathe. So that's one issue. Another interesting thing I looked as I did a bit of research on all of this is there are hundreds of millions of dollars worth of state and nonprofit property in this community that don't pay the mill. Other communities around our state don't have quite that. And I don't know the exact number of, of properties that are tax exempt, but being the capital city, there's a significant amount of that. So right out of the gate, we have a serious disadvantage in how communities normally fund road maintenance. There's a lot of taxing entities out there on top of what we have, and then a lot of those properties we can't collect taxes at all on. So as part of our initial outreach in talking to the community about what to do here, the conversation has always been, what kind of roads do you want? And how long do you want it to take us to do that? So the question of whether or not to renew the half-cent sales tax or raise it to 3/4 really is the response to answering 2 questions. One, what do you want us to do? Do you want us to just repair the existing roads we have? Do you want us to repair the existing roads and put in the sidewalks? Do you want us to expand them? do you want us to do the Complete Streets program that a lot of folks have advocated for? And then the second question is, how long are you willing to wait? Even in the current 10-year proposal we have, even at the 3/4 cent sales tax, that's not enough based on the current estimates to get through all of the roads we need to fix in the community. So the answers that I'm seeking from our constituents is, what do you want us to do? Do you want us to just simply repair, or do you want us to do complete streets when we can everywhere? And then, how long are you willing to wait? From there, that's, I think, where we can determine what the sales tax needs to be. You know, if indeed folks are willing to wait 20 years for roads, we could probably get away with just doing the half-cent sales tax. If all you want is the existing roads to be fixed and you're willing to wait 20 years to get there in some cases. But if folks want those roads done faster, that costs money. I wholeheartedly agree in taking a look at efficiency and ensuring that we're being as possibly efficient with the revenue we're given as we can, and that our processes are absolutely working the best we can. Part of the reason we hired Dr. Peak was because he has expertise in this. And I think he's done a great job in looking through and doing improvements. Is the process perfect? No. But the key to remember is it will never be perfect. That's an impossibility. In any process you have, there will always be some inefficiency because humans are humans. So what I would encourage folks to do is, as we have this conversation, reach out to us and give us your opinion on those two questions. What do you want us to do, and how quick do you want us to do it? And from there, we can tell you how much it'll cost, and then whether or not we want to try and do it now or wait. Thank you.
Additional comments or questions? Councilman Mays, followed by Councilman Henderson.
Quick question, Dr. Peak. I saw there was an announcement yesterday, and you were in the photo from the announcement, so I assume you're well aware of the federal fund exchange getting reinstated. Are there any projections, and maybe this is a question for Nikki as well, as to how much additional revenue that will bring in to the city?
We have not run that as of the announcement yesterday, but we could do that and get that back to you.
Okay.
Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Dr. Peak, kind of to follow on Deputy Mayor Jensen's comments, the projections that you showed us, as I understand it, are simply replacing the streets as they currently are, correct? You're not talking about adding lanes or doing geometric improvements or anything else, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. I mean, this is, the presentation was focused on fixing the pavement, existing pavement that's not there, not adding pavement, not adding.
So no sidewalks, no curb and gutter?
Yeah, I mean.
Unless it's already there.
I just caveat, it does assume, like we took under the $24 million scenario, assuming that we still do alley projects, the sidewalk, I mean, what is in the existing half cent? So we took the budget that was allocated to streets.
But by and large, it's not what we would consider complete streets with, sidewalks on both sides, a 10-foot trail on one side, things
Yeah,
like
it's not
that.
adding things to those streets that are not there today.
Okay. I just wanted to, I just think we need to be clear about that too, that even at the 31 million, all we're doing is getting more lane miles of existing streets.
That's exactly right, yeah.
Okay.
With that increased budget, you're just increasing the amount of street work you're doing.
Okay, thank you.
So there is no work on the infrastructure then to ensure that we're not doubling up on the work that we've been doing in the past?
So there's coordination through CIP process. So we're showing you a budget for pavement, but like I said, annually what we'd do is sit down with utility staff and say, hey, we're going to be reconstructing that road. How does that align with your priorities for replacing water and sewer infrastructure? And basically, linking those up so we do those at the same time. If we have a bikeways master plan project that's coming into that area that we're proposing doing it, that's another fund source, and that's the way we've been operating. We have these different funding sources that fund those other improvements, and we match them together with the half-cent funds to deliver that complete package. So we would continue to do that. It's just what we're showing you is that increased funding really gets at the question we've been talking about, fixing the streets.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Robertson, would you run us through the time schedule we have for this? Because I understand that the approved ballot language has to be ready to go, approved by the county and everything by the August deadline, but we have deadlines in advance of that because there's a possibility that even though the council approves the ballot language, the county might not. Would you run us through what we need to do for that?
The time frame is basically you have to get it to the election authority on the 24th of August. I think that what Jason is saying is that it's going to be very beneficial as far as getting this marketed to have all of these decisions made as soon as possible. But you could go, I think it was up to the 14th of August. I wouldn't want a decision made any later than that, but that's pushing it way close to
So
the
they have to
edge.
accept whatever we send over regardless.
They have to accept it. They don't have any veto authority or anything, but the AG has to take a look at it after they receive it from the county election
okay.
authority and.
Because initially we'd been told there was a June or July deadline, and so that's no longer the case.
We had it was initially they said that the election language had to be over there in August, so we used August 1st as a very conservative deadline, but it's actually later in August.
Okay.
That's why we set the July 17th meeting as the date we needed the
Excellent.
the
Okay.
language.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Just to follow up one last time on some of the questions that have come up earlier, when, in some of the early discussions about the possible proposals for this sales tax, there was discussion that maybe half cent could be just like it was before, but the extra 1/4% could be added, and it would involve widening and adding amenities, possibly doing the utilities, contributing to the utilities underground. And so those were kicked around. I think that's why these questions have come forward. You are saying that at this point, that is not, you're narrowing into a single proposal, and there isn't anything about expansion or adding amenities in any of your proposals?
So what I'd say is we have other fund sources currently within the CIP that we partner with this fund to do those ads. The
Right.
infill sidewalk program, for example,
Right.
is one. And so we would continue that process. Just what I'd say to you is a staff person, recommending, I constantly hear, what are we doing to fix our streets? So the program we presented to you focuses on that. We share, we did a back of the envelope, I think, calculation for you about what that ad, if you took the streets that didn't have curb and gutter or sidewalk, those things. And I want to say that was an additional $7 million per year over 10 years, in addition to what you're allocating for streets. So that's just, like I said, back of the envelope budget of what you'd be talking about if there was an expectation. To add all that, that's an additional $7 million annually over what we're showing you.
And I remember those conversations, and I think others do too. And so that clarification is for us, and then for the public, if that's really where the staff is at this point, that's important.
City Manager.
Mayor, Council, as I look at some of the things that have been said, I understand the concerns that has been expressed regarding are we managing these funds accurately. I can't speak for every year, whether we did or didn't do a good job, because that would be addressing people that were here and they did the best they could with what they did. But what I can tell you is I've come in and analyzed what we're doing. I see improvements that are being made. And whether we're all the way where we need to be, that could be a different discussion. But I can tell you, we put out our projects a month and a half earlier for bid than we did last year. That's progress. Every bid but one, and that was only about $20,000 more, came in under budget estimate. We've had multiple projects that have come in hundreds of thousands of dollars below estimate, and one over $1 million below estimate. So we are doing a good job. We're doing a good job of designing. Otherwise, we wouldn't receive bids such as that, because when the project's designed well, contractors typically bid better because they know what to expect. We're making progress. Now, you can discuss whether or not we fill a pothole correctly. There's different times when you fill a pothole in a given year and you don't do what Mr. Ledbetter said. Now, I've met with the guys and they have all the equipment to do it. And I know that they're instructed by their staff and they'll be followed up by their leadership to ensure they do it correctly. Do we get it done right every time? Maybe not. But I can tell you that that's what leadership in the Public Works Department is expressing. So we're doing that. We have the equipment to do it, and we're making sure he's working to make sure that it happens that way, and that's my responsibility to ensure that he does. But one of the things that I want to comment on is the issue of the extra 0.25%. If you look at that, I know it's a regressive tax, but every $1,000 you spend, that means you have to pay $2.50 extra. $2.50 for every $1,000 you spend extra. It's not a lot. That's 5 cents more for every $20 you spend. We're not talking a lot that ends up increasing in order to progress the progress that we could make relative to the street construction. So I think we need to make sure we're looking at that in a perspective. This isn't a huge increase to a person's budget. Now, if you don't have a lot of money, it's a bigger increase. I get that. But it is something that we need to keep in mind. And I believe that we're on the right track with the things that Mr. Peak is doing and what we're doing. I've already challenged him to increase getting the bids out earlier next year. Told him January, February, I want them out. So those challenges have been issued, and his staff is working to accomplish that. Have identified the projects. His system relative to acquiring real estate, moving utilities is paying dividends. We see it in a number of the projects. So I think we got to remember we're on the right progression. Yes, it's only been a few years, but I think that if we continue those things, we're going to see a good usage of this money, and we're going to see the progress that he's identifying that'll happen over the next 10 years. So that's my soapbox speech, sorry.
Thank you, City Manager. I just want to alert the council that we have 2 individuals signed up for public comment, and we have 11 minutes to wrap up the meeting as per statute. I mean, by ordinance. So she's like, so moved. So
Extend until we're done.
if there's,
I just had 1 2-second comment.
yes.
So my 2-second comment is, I remember on the CIP bus tour, we drove past a street, and there was heartburn because we had just repaved the existing street and not widened it the 2 foot it needed to fit, because we couldn't do that with the sales tax. And so I thought part of the conversation was not to box ourselves into that same situation again in the future. So my fear is we're not setting ourselves up to get out of that particular situation. So there you go.
So if there's no additional, yep, Councilman Mays.
Real quick, thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to just bring everyone's attention to the little handout that I put on everyone's seat. I sent out an email to approximately, well, after all the bounce backs, it was about 715 folks. And I was surprised at the response rate. It's about 19% of people responded. And based on these numbers, I'm not sure that and this is just my district primarily, but I'm not sure that a 3/4% tax would pass. I would encourage you guys, I've got about 50 comments that people left on the poll as well. I would encourage everybody to kind of skim through those, because I think it pretty much sums up the totality of what we're going to get from constituents, in that there's a lot of distrust is what it looks like when you read these, and no fault of yours, but that's what we're looking at. And so I just wanted to call everybody's attention to it, and then, let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much for doing this. This is phenomenal. Seeing no comments, I don't know if you guys want to do the next item on the agenda would be
Do we have public?
extend. Yes, we do have public comments. So do we have a motion for extension? Councilwoman Ortiz?
We're done, yes.
Extends until we wrap up the meeting. Do we have a second? We have a second, and Councilman Emerson. All those in, any comments? We now proceed with the voting. All right. So now that we can breathe, are there any other comments for Dr. Peak or questions? Okay, seeing none, we move now into the announcement sections. City Clerk?
the June 19th meeting, we have 2 presentations, Topeka Police Department Citizen Advisory Council and then Affordable Housing Task Force recommendation. We have 1 board appointment to the Topeka Sustainability Advisory Board. We have an expenditure ordinance on the consent agenda along with 2 noise exceptions. And then the non-action items include a discussion on parking on unimproved surfaces and a second discussion on the 2019 City of Topeka operating budget.
Now, public comments, the city manager.
The only comment I have, Mayor, is we've already discussed is that Saturday at 9 a.m. at the Law Enforcement Center is our, June 16th is our budget session and also the special meeting now.
Wonderful. I have a few comments, so thank you for extending the meeting. So I can breathe and not trying to say things in a rush. So first of all, I want to say thank you to my colleagues that were wonderful, and especially a big thanks to Deputy Mayor for running the meeting last Tuesday. It was kind of funny. I have as I've matured in my life, I have learned that I have a gluten intolerance, and I am working with 10 amazing 501 kids in my other job, doing a summer camp and teaching them all about the energy industry, and they're doing an amazing project that's going to potentially provide a solution to reduce water usage as we're generating energy. And we had a chef from Crazy Tasty Chef that makes really good food, and he made French toast. I know too much information. Michelle had some French toast thinking it's a little bit, it's not gonna hurt. It hurt. And I ended up having a really severe migraine. To make matters worse, when I went to the hospital, I was given a medication. I don't take anything that's strong. And they gave me a medication thinking that it was gonna be helpful, and it ended up giving me a really bad reaction. So I couldn't feel my arms pretty well, and it left me very jittery, and I just went home and tried waking up to come to the meeting, and I could not make it. So feeling much better right now. So thank you for all the messages of care and concern, and Leo for the popcorn that you dropped off in the house with a sweet note. So thank God I drank a lot of water, flushed out of my system, ended up going to Boston. I want to say a huge thank you to Tom Cochran that runs the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and a significant thanks to Mayor Marty Welsh from Boston that did a phenomenal job in hosting all of us mayors from all across the nation. The conversations that I had with different mayors were just spectacular. The resources that we are able to have because we're part of the conversation and part of the table are phenomenal. I want to express my sincere gratitude to Mayor Garcetti from LA for having a conversation with me, sharing with me some of his experience, and to my newfound brother in Miami, Francis Suarez, who has been phenomenal to talk with, and the network that we're creating. And friends, what I'm telling you is this. What's happening is that people all across the nation are talking about the city of Topeka, and they're talking about the city of Topeka with a positive light. They're talking about the city of Topeka being on the table. We had a massive conversation of the 3 I's that the Conference of Mayors is working on, which is inclusion, infrastructure, and innovation. And the city of Topeka is leading in innovation. We are 4% away from being a roll call city for what works communities. Bloomberg is looking at us. We did not have that before. So thank you to the staff and to, our IT, Sherry Schoonover, who has gotten us to where we're at with that process. We're talking about infrastructure. That's what we're talking about tonight. And we're talking also about inclusion. And that is something that we have been talking at Momentum 2022 and as a whole community, because we're talking about how do we provide for everyone so that everybody has a good quality of life. And it was wonderful to have a meeting with Gallup and them asking us mayors, what are we doing to bridge the divide that we're having with income volatility? And when they heard about Momentum 2022 and that we're vulnerable enough to have metrics that show that we're not doing great in areas, but we're addressing them head on, people were impressed. So my friends, Topeka is in the map, and we are being looked at with positive eyes. And that's all thanks to all of you. In addition to that, there were some conversations that I will share with everybody. It's Councilwoman Hiller always likes, and we have this little thing that if we go to a conference and the city pays for it, we report back to all of you. So this is what I'm trying to do. There was a great conversation in which we had Sheryl Sandberg and other people in the panel talk about what they're doing and what they're seeing as trends. Everybody is looking for digital intelligence. Before it used to be, are you computer literate? Now the next question that you're going to have in resumes and being asked is, are you digitally literate? And Facebook is investing monies, so much so that Topeka also got selected. And there's going to be some businesses that are going to receive training. The other area that we talked about was Senator Warren talked about the fact that one of the things that we should discuss as we're talking about bridging that divide is childcare. I can tell you that when I was working at a nonprofit and had children, it was $800 per child. $800 per child. If you are working and you are making $7 or $8 an hour and you're having to pay $800 per child, it's really hard to bridge that gap in order for you to become sustainable. And these are things that we're talking about that I also want to have you think about as we're moving forward. It talked about opportunity zones. We have a great model in Baltimore. The mayor of Baltimore was talking about P3s, which is what they call public-private partnerships, and how now when you're looking at opportunity zones, it's so important for us to work with foundations and work with the private sector so that we can start bringing in funds into neighborhoods that really need it. And of course, like I said, they talked about equity. So I want to also give a huge thank to Representative Patton. As everybody knows, I am part of the leadership for the Freedom Now USA program, and I was asked to find a co-chair, and Representative Patton is going to be the co-chair for that. So it's just wonderful to have on the government side two strong people that are doing this. Finally, and certainly not least, I want to say thank you to everybody that participated in last weekend's event. I am so sorry that I was not able to be here. I thank the city manager for his leadership and everybody that was there at the Strengthening the Relationships with the Community and Police event. I've heard nothing but great things. I heard that there was a lot of vulnerability and that the city of Topeka is having hard conversations that are gonna move us forward. So thank you. And for those of you that didn't have a chance to see it, I also wanna thank Chief Cochran and City Manager. He was so responsive. Yesterday, when I came back from Boston, I told him, hey, I'm getting comments and concerns about what happened last weekend. Can we do a press conference? And can we talk about this with the public? And immediately, not only did he say yes, but he said yes, and let's bring Chief. And we ended up having, when I called a few people to say, hey, we're going to do this in City Manager's office, poor City Manager's office was bombarded. We ended up having every single person from the media answer our call. And most importantly, the people that were there from the community said, this is wonderful, we needed this. And the media said, this is wonderful, we needed this. And this is how we want to address everything that is happening in our community. Not by hiding, but by working together the way that we are doing. We do have the right people on the table. I so thank you for being here in this community. You are wonderful to work with. And we are addressing the issues. We're not hiding about what's happening in our community, but we're working together, and we need all of you to continue doing what we're doing. This council is phenomenal. Thank you. Thank you for these conversations. That's it. Councilwoman Heller.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for taking your time to attend those conferences and represent us and to bring the information back, which you already did earlier in this meeting before we got to this point. And I really appreciate that. And it sounds like that representation is going to be a big plus for us as well. I wanted to shout out to some personnel for recent things myself. I really appreciate, we've had, I don't know if it's a record, but between the utility water main breaks and the various things happening with the different streets, certainly Public Works, streets and utilities have been out there both working on a record number of long-range projects as well as the short-term emergencies, and appreciate that as well as the planning on your part and everybody else's. Neighborhood Relations has been out doing the team up cleanups and really stretching and trying to work with the neighborhoods on ideas as well as working on the policy stuff that we had today, and that's big as well, appreciated. And PD with the recent actions, they've been doing a lot of what appear to be picking up, if you will, bad guys that they've been looking for a long time. We are getting a lot of reports. Then when you add the the number of events that happened just this past, over a 4-day string, that was pretty incredible. And so really appreciate all of that work and having that happen at the same time as the Department of Justice summits and so on. That's a lot. I can't remember one other thing just to share, so whoever needs to know it gets it. There's Public Health and Safety Committee, I think, is taking on the camping. Hopefully we'll hear about who's going to work on the panhandling thing soon, but I was at the Riverfront meeting, and a gentleman from Kansas Department of Wildlife Parks and Tourism mentioned that they are considering doing a permitting program for people using the river. And my understanding was what they're thinking about is something like backcountry permits, where you register, maybe even with your cell phone, so that they know you're there, but also for safety as well as users. And so he explained that the state's territory on the river is from high water mark to high water mark. And I just wanted to share that in this discussion of camping that's going to start in public health and safety as we develop people on the river. I wasn't aware that they were looking at that. So FYI to whoever is interested. That's it. Thank you.
Councilwoman Claire? Councilwoman Ortiz?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're going to have a public health and safety meeting at 3 o'clock on Friday, this Friday. Just wanted to let everybody know that. I got something very interesting at an NIA yesterday, and it's gun stoppers, cash rewards, and you can get up to 500. This is a new incentive that the police department's to try to get some of those illegal guns. So if you know somebody like Mr. Henderson, I turned him in. He said he had 5, so I'm looking for 2,500 as soon as they pick those up. Turn them in. Let's try to help them. I also attended Saturday the Stand Up for Life at the Teen Center, or not the Teen Center, the Boys and Girls Club on 27th and Adams, and because the mayor couldn't be there, and then the deputy mayor couldn't be there, and I guess it just got trickled down to, the lower end, the podium at the bottom there, But as I was there, it was very, very, I really, I'll be honest, I didn't want to go, and I ended up staying the whole time, and once I get with kids, it's all over, but I had other plans, but I'm glad I got to go. It was very emotional and it was very rewarding for people that are just grieving of the homicides or just in general, or loved ones that have died in the line of fire or killed, and our officers were there, and they were dressed down and playing with the kids, and that was huge. That was really huge. We had one officer. I was praying he didn't get hurt. He went off the water slide because I didn't know who would handle that. Would that be a work comp issue, and how would we deal with that? But he did okay. We got him on the body cam, and we'll share that with you. He was tall too. But I personally want to thank the city manager and I'm gonna call them Mr. City Manager and Mrs. City Manager. They came out and they ate with the kids and they shared with the kids. And I missed his talking because I was watching this officer go down the water slide. But I just want to say personally, thank you for investing and being here. But most of all, just investing not only in our city but our kids. And people talked about that to me. They appreciate that, we got Mr. Henderson just on the other side, and he didn't even come over the line, So when they see that, they appreciate that. Again, thank you, City Manager.
Emerson.
Well, yes, thank you, Councilmember Ortiz, for that.
Smoke alarms, isn't it?
Yes.
Is it?
Now, in all seriousness, I do not have 5 illegal. I only have 4. No, I do not have any illegal guns. My son actually does have 3 guns, but they are legal. But in all seriousness, I believe this is next Monday. Yeah, we're having a great thing in District 4. It's the dedication of the Habitat for Humanity home dedication. I'll just read it as, we invite you to join us for the 104th home dedication and blessing on Monday, June 18th at 4 p.m. at 3339 Southeast Powell Street. Everyone's invited. Love to see people there. It's a great event to celebrate. So, thanks, guys.
Councilman Padilla.
I too want to congratulate the chief for hosting the community relations event. I think that it shows an awful lot of openness and open-minded approach to law enforcement. It's difficult to take criticism sometimes, but it's important that you do, and you weigh it with everything that your agency is doing for the community. So my congratulations to the chief and his staff. Also, I'd like to say to Mr. Haugen, one of your inspectors, John, and is it Chardine, is that how you pronounce it?
Chardine.
Chardine. Yeah, he's been very helpful in following up on a complaint that I learned about when I was walking the neighborhoods in my district, and he's given me updates, and today he gave me an update that will really please the neighbors in that neighborhood, saying that justice has run its course and there has been some action taken, and I appreciate his diligence to that problem and getting back with me. So congratulations to your office for working with me and taking care of those problems. And I appreciate everything that you're really trying to do with the magnitude of the issues that are out there. So thank you, Mr. Haugen. That's
Deputy
all.
Mayor.
Thank you, Your Honor. So a couple of quick things. I had the privilege of delivering opening remarks last Friday to the community conversation, and I was blown away by the attendance that was there, by the people that they were so engaged and they were excited, and they were talking together, trying to figure out how this group was going to congeal and deliver ideas. And then I got to come back later that day and actually hear them deliver their ideas, and it was just an incredible experience to see how people that had, a lot of them didn't know each other at all, and they came together in small groups and they worked the problem, and there was a lot of really good ideas that came out of that. And we had just a ton of police officers there. Some were in uniform, some were in plain clothes. They were all engaged, participating. They were working with the group. I was really, really excited to see how well this had worked. And we're only the second group in the United States to have done this. So really excited to see how that worked. I have been doing a bunch of work to get this committee up and going, and I'm pleased to be able to report that all of the folks have agreed to participate. I am joined by the dueling mics on either end of me. Lieutenant Aaron Jones from the Police Department, Chief Duke from the Fire Department, Bill Persinger from Vallejo, and Barry Feeker from the Rescue Mission, and last but not least, Brian Cole from the Department of Corrections. So that's your gang of 8 that we've assembled to try and sort out how all this is going to work together. So what I would encourage folks out there in TV land, if you have ideas on this, and then also other nonprofits, this is an incredible time for us to come together in this community and not only review this ordinance, but work the problem. We've put a bunch of effort into this in the last few years, and I think this is a great time to take a look at what we've done and talk about how we can work together as both the government, as the county, and as the nonprofit sector to take this serious issue to the next level. So I'm particularly excited to work with all of these folks and get that up and going and get a report back. So we should have those meetings put together soon. I would encourage all of you on the council, if you can, to come by and attend, because we could use your opinions as well, and they would be very much welcome. So, let's see. I've also gotten pretty heavily involved in the broadband committee that's working through JADO, and really a lot of good things that are happening there, I believe. So I would encourage you all to give me your feedback on that. We're basically trying to tackle essentially 2 core issues. One, in the county where there is no opportunity of access, there's just no infrastructure, what can we do to help deliver that? And then in the community where there is the opportunity for access, how do we make that affordable? And then are there reasons why, when it is affordable, folks are choosing not to take that? So looking for you all, your ideas, the community at large. I've met with a number of folks to try and sort out how can we leverage the power we have
to make this work and to move us ahead. And our goal is to try and get something done as much as we can in line with the Momentum 2022 stuff. So, last but not least, I really want to send my thoughts and prayers out to the folks that suffered all the violence this weekend. It's really tragic when that happens. I wish we had an easy explanation for why. Sometimes there are no good answers to violence in almost any case. And I want those folks that are affected by that to know that we are thinking about you, and as much as we can, we'll be there to help. But violence is tragic, and often there's no good reason, no excuse. So, thank you all. Have a lovely week.
Councilman Mays, Councilman Lesser? Okay, seeing no further comments, we now go to the public comment. The first person signed up to speak is Mr. Chris Schultz.
I know you've all heard enough from me tonight, but I just wanted to say thank you for hearing me out earlier. I really do appreciate that. As you sit here and represent our community, you bring the humanity, the heart, and the accountability, and I really appreciate your consideration. I don't like to bring something negative without bringing something positive, so I just wanted to say thank you very much.
Thank you. Next person signed up to speak is Mr. Clark Trammell.
Well, I'll close out the evening and I'll make it short because we've all been here long. In listening to all this, there's a lot of comments I'd like to make, but I'll make them at a later date. But I do want to say to everybody, we're all going through life together. And I think we need to realize that when we get into these conversations. Nothing's personal. Councilwoman Claire, Councilman Padilla, with the responses that I kind of heard were directed at me. But I have my feelings, you have yours. At the same time, I respect what you're saying. And I'm here to be a positive part of the conversation. And I don't come here to cause trouble, but I come here hopefully to add to the conversation, to give you something to help you make hard decisions. You're doing an excellent job, Manager Trout. I really want to see us give him the opportunity to do his magic on a long-term basis, and I think the community supports that. So we are all here in Topeka. We are Topekans. Picking up on what you said, there's a few things we ought to think about. One, we do have a food desert we need to address. We ought to look at community gardens, look at Detroit. I looked at that when I was with Go Topeka. And Madam Mayor and I are working together, and they've got a terrific program that could be implemented here for all the right reasons. And the other thing is, I want to plant a seed. We need to become a global economy. We are not going to grow, nor is any community by itself anymore. The world is a global economy. The state needs to be a global economy. Topeka needs to be the leader in a global economy in Northeast Kansas to grow, to prosper, and to move us forward in the right way. So as we all go through life together, we all partner together. I respect you all, and I thank you, and I look forward to the next day. Good day.
Have a good evening. Thank you very much. Seeing no other business, there is no executive session tonight. We are adjourned.